Sieges suck in Total War Warhammer 3, and today I'm going to tell you why. For a long time, sieges have been a point of vigorous contention in the community, and today I want to put my stamp on why I think sieges suck and hypothesize on what Creative Assembly can do about them in the future. Without addressing sieges in their entirety, Warhammer 3 will never reach its full potential. With such a core part of the game feeling as buggy, bad and unfinished as it currently feels, I want to do everything in my power to alert Creative Assembly to this glaring weakness in the game and potentially offer feasible suggestions to make the experience better. My name is Blake and I bid you my fondest welcome to Blake's Takes, where today we'll be diving deep into why I think Warhammer 3 sieges are as broken as the American healthcare system. Well, maybe if we paid $11,700 per siege. Is my take hot or not? Let me know in the comments below, and if you enjoy today's video, please consider liking and subscribing. It really helps the channel out. We'll start off with Arse-ladders. Arse-ladders. The ability of all infantry units to magically queef a ladder out of themselves to climb the walls is fundamentally poor game design. The reason for this is your walls are now next to worthless. Any infantry can scale them, and they can attack units on the walls from anywhere as long as they have the infantry to do so. As the enemy can attack from everywhere, and they often will, you won't be able to match where they are because your garrisons are so terrible, and they'll be bringing a full stack at least. On top of this, if units dock ladders on the walls and the gates get broken down, then units will pathfind over the ladders as opposed to going through the gate. Another big irritation. The solution is simple. Remove Arse-ladders and replace them with constructible ladders like they had in previous iterations of Total War and newer ones such as Total War Pharaoh. This will force the majority of enemy sieges which rely on infantry to concentrate their forces on single points as opposed to spreading their forces everywhere with impunity like they currently do. Having spoken with CA on this subject, this is something they've tried, but unfortunately have run into AI constraints when they've tried to remove these bum ladders, so we'll have to see if this is ever something which they can get right. Also, ethereal units should be able to pass through walls. I think that would give them an excellent added bit of flavour and a nice reason for bringing them. Chapter 2. Walls don't matter. As touched upon in the Arse-ladders section, walls don't matter. In fact, defending the walls is often a hindrance rather than a help. It is often the correct play to abandon the walls and hole up in the victory point in the city and abuse some choke points. This is really silly, and not how sieges should work. Also, the fact that units can apparate on and off the walls, phasing up and through them like a fart in the wind, is another feature that needs review. In other Total Wars, there would be set entrances to the walls, normally by the towers, where you could exploit a choke point. In Warhammer 3, any unit can just disembark from the walls wherever they please, rendering them absolutely useless. So, what's the solution? Well, firstly, the Arse-ladders, as mentioned previously, they desperately need to go. Secondly, entrances should be added to the walls where units need to go to get on and off them. This at least lets the defender position units tactically to engage them. At the moment, it's just a big clusterfuck and there's no way to defend against it. The walls need more buffs for soldiers occupying them, perhaps more ammunition for ranged units, similar to how buildable barricades used to work. I know that they've recently added more range to units, which are shooting from the walls, which is good. Perhaps greater debuffs for enemies climbing on the walls via ladders. Towers are also staggeringly weak for most factions. A few factions, like Skaven and the Lizardmen, have exceptional towers, but most towers do very little. I think the wall's towers should be buffed in terms of damage, but nerfed in terms of range. This will make the towers an important objective to fight over, whilst also not forcing the attacker to immediately charge the settlement. Siege weapons should outrange towers. I shouldn't have to park a general in front of my siege engines to act as a bullet and arrow sponge. The towers should have a 360-degree firing line, so they can attack units which are embarking on the walls, like in previous Total War games. Again, this just makes it an objective to fight over. You'll want to secure the towers so that your units will have an easier time in the settlement. I think this issue is very easily fixable, with just a bit more thought put behind it. Chapter 3. Garrisons. Garrisons suck for the vast majority of factions in Total War Warhammer 3, and they're very limited ways for the player to actually enhance their garrisons. This is shoddy because it limits the player's ability to use tactics to defend their empire. They're shoehorned into using a set bunch of units to try and defend a city, often against hopeless odds. How to fix this problem? I'd love to see a system introduced in Warhammer 3 where you can select units for your garrisons. You should be able to recruit extra units to garrison strategically important settlements. With the way that supply lines work, having a lord sit in there is not financially viable, despite the reduction in supply line costs that occurred in Warhammer 3. I'd love to be able to hire a far cheaper garrison commander, which has extremely limited movement range outside of a settlement. Something which I'm delighted to see introduced for the upcoming Kislev rework with their Atamans. This, however, should be something that all races have, the ability to project their garrisons to deal with annoying raids or squash rebellions early. Chapter 4. Overly complex and broken maps. Function over form. This particular methodology, simply put, means your product should function at a baseline level before you start slapping extra bells and whistles on it. This is a design philosophy which has been fully ignored by the Siege design team at Creative Assembly, where we have these gorgeous looking siege maps which don't fucking work. Pathfinding is horribly broken in a lot of these sprawling maps. Units will break apart or start bugging out. There's also plenty of places where you think a ranged unit can fire from, but there's a speck of rock or something out of place and they end up obstructed and not firing. It's very frustrating and not a good experience. To fix this will be expensive. I know what I'm asking for is basically a top to bottom review of all of these siege maps, which I'm certain won't happen. But so many of these maps are just broken, which is a massive shame because they're beautiful maps. The maps are just too complex. The streets are too narrow to handle playing on ultra unit scale. The infantry units just break apart and it descends into units just mashing against each other. It's very difficult to position units tactically. The maps need wider streets for the movement of soldiers. It's hard because siege maps have always been problematic in Total War games. They were broken, but they were at least fun. These maps are just ghastly to play, and always descend into a clusterfuck. I don't know how Creative Assembly can realistically address this issue, and, truth be told, I don't know whether they can for Warhammer 3. But hopefully in future titles they can learn from these mistakes here and not repeat them. Chapter 5. Siege Map Variety. As I touched upon in my Shadows of Change re-review, siege map variety is still dreadful. There are just far too few maps, and seeing the exact same map come up multiple times in a row is pretty disappointing. Another expensive issue which I don't realistically think they'll attend to with anything more than token siege map additions, but I want it on the record that it's shit and boring. Employing the exact same strategy of find the wall section with the least amount of towers and attack there is very dull, and it needs review. This is especially true of the big named settlements like Carrick 8 Peaks and Altdorf. These should have their own unique siege maps, and I think it's doing a disservice to these cities to not have them. Anyway, this is another expensive issue which I doubt will be actioned, but I'd love to be proven wrong. Go on CA, add some more siege maps. Pretty please? Chapter 6. AI Behaviour and Sallying Out. The AI will sit passively in sieges, moving troops around, gratefully accepting the magic and siege weapon fire you bestow upon them. Some factions, such as the Vampire Counts and Slanesh, don't even have ranged units, so it would make more sense for them to sally out and attack the player. I'm not going to pretend I know anything about AI or how to program it, but I will say factions should be able to tell when they're comprised of only melee units that need to go out and get into melee. It would be nice to see factions like the Vampire Counts sally out and attack you rather than huddling up in their city, imbibing your ammunition and spells like your aunt imbibes $3 cocktails in Tijuana. They should be smart enough to know that the only way they're going to win is by attacking you and getting up close and personal. On the subject of sallying out, I'd love to see sorties not magically teleport the combatants to a land battle. I'd like to see the return of factions having to exit their city sensibly to counterattack a siege. It's a bit immersion breaking teleporting to a totally different area when your besieged forces are supposed to be surrounded. CA, please make actual sally outs a thing again. It would add a layer of tactics which I miss from the former games, where you'd have to frantically reposition your forces to repel the sortie. I don't know why they did away with it, but my guess is because the gates are immeasurably balked in Total War Warhammer 3. Speaking of which, Chapter 7, the Gate Bug. How is this thing still present in the game? You send a unit to attack the gates open, the unit walks in, and then the gates close behind him, trapping the unit inside to be slaughtered by the inhabitants. Please, for the love of all that is holy, fix this, CA. It's been years. Chapter 8, Buildable Towers and Barricades. There's just something off about the buildable towers and barricades in the game. They've gotten better with additional building places and no longer being able to be rebuilt when they're destroyed, but they're still not there. I think it's incredibly lazy having each tower being a wooden, ramshackle looking thing for all races, and that needs a facelift desperately. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I thought this tower was a placeholder when I saw it in the original demo of Warhammer 3 back in the day. I was shocked to see that it was in the launch of the game, and I'm shocked to this day it still hasn't been addressed. Each faction should have their own distinct buildable tower at the very least. The Dawi building the same kind of ramshackle wooden tower as the Skaven would is a grudge of the highest order. CA, please fix this. So there's some reasons why sieges suck in Total War Warhammer 3. There are certainly more, this list is not exhaustive. It's a massive shame and a missed opportunity that this game mode is so unfun, and has no doubt irreparably damaged the long-term success of Warhammer 3. To CA, I say, you've begun listening to the player base and delivered some great improvements. I implore you to build on this success and review sieges, because in their current iteration, they suck, and sieges are a big part of the game. There are a lot of things that I understand will be too expensive for you to fix. You still need to earn your crust. The relentless march of late-stage capitalism spares no individual or company, as passion for your project is siphoned away to be replaced with value for your executives, as the things you used to love doing slowly morph into abstract nodes of wealth, interchangeable assets that you might absorb and discard according to the opaque whims of the market. I get that. Many patients in the American healthcare system get that too, but there's plenty of things on this list which I feel can easily and cheaply be implemented, and will certainly encourage people to pick up DLCs in the future, knowing it's been addressed. It may be a cost, but I feel that the long-term growth and health of the game demands this be addressed, and it would be short-sighted not to do so. So, do you agree with my take? As always, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to get a discussion going on the health of sieges in-game. If you disagree or have more points to add, please do. Also, I want to give a massive shout out to my Patreon supporters. D, Joshua Krager, Dinkle250, Gonk, Little Horus, Hatoris Kurz, and Bongos McDongos. I've been Blake, delivering my take. Thank you all so much for watching.